Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
The body requires 20 different amino acids in order to function properly, and each one of those individual amino acids plays a highly critical role in certain pathways and certain functionality of organ systems. And when we think about our overall health and wellness, if we are not getting adequate amounts of these key amino acids, then things can start to go awry. So we're going to look at creatine because this is one of those amino acids that oftentimes people think about it just in the setting of working out and for building muscle mass, which obviously we know that it serves a purpose in that. But I want to talk about some more of the critical roles that creatine plays in the human body and talk about some of the science behind that because I do think it's highly relevant. I am Amanda Williams, MD, MPH, and creatine happens to be one of those nifty little amino acids that has all of this potential in the human body. And we usually just think about it when we're in that setting of muscle building and working out and for exercise performance. And so you often would hear about people using like creatine monohydrate powder when it came to a pre-workout or a post-workout routine. And one of the things that we know is that creatine throughout our life plays a really important role when it comes to maintaining muscle mass. So especially as we get older and we are more prone to the potential for age-related muscle mass loss, such as sarcopenia, that yes, we want to make sure that we are getting adequate amounts of creatine from the diet. But supplementation oftentimes can be very, very beneficial for key targeted reasons. So I'm going to talk about those. Now, what we do know about creatine is that this is something that is naturally synthesized in the human body, predominantly in the liver and in the kidneys. But what we many times don't realize is what it's actually doing. And so when we talk about amino acids being the building block to our proteins, and generally speaking, a lot of the amino acids that we obtain come from sources such as meat and fish. So for someone who maybe doesn't incorporate foods like that into their diet, then yes, supplementation is something that you certainly would want to look at. But when we look at creatine, we have to realize that creatine itself plays a really important role in energy production. So we talk about ATP or adenosine triphosphate. This is why when you look at it in that world of exercise and muscle building, why creatine has gained such notoriety, because not only is it beneficial for that skeletal muscle mass, it's also very beneficial when it comes to energy output. So that's key. But I want to go beyond that of its utilization in terms of athletic performance. And we know that the majority of clinical research studies looking at creatine are in that setting of athletic performance. So human clinical trials with athletes, for example, looking at the benefits of supplementation of things such as creatine monohydrate. In the Journal of International Sports Nutrition, they were actually looking at the effects of pre versus post-workout supplementation with the utilization of creatine monohydrate and looking at body composition and looking at strength. So even for those who have the concerns with maintaining not only healthy muscle mass, but also maintaining healthy body fat, looking at the supplementation of creatine monohydrate oftentimes is not a bad idea. So this is one of those particular studies where they recognize that indeed this was a really nice way to promote healthy fat mass as well as muscle mass. So these are sometimes things that we overlook. We think of creatine, we think of muscle building, but I want you to think beyond that. So there was another study that they did up in Canada at McMaster University that I thought was really quite interesting, and it kind of caught my attention many years ago. This was done back in 2000, and they were looking at the benefits of creatine monohydrate supplementation in elderly individuals. Remember I talked about the sarcopenia and that age-related muscle mass loss, which we know the more that we lose muscle mass as we get older, the weaker we are making the underlying skeleton and the immune system and everything in totality. So we like to maintain our muscle mass through the entire aging process. So through McMaster University, they were trying to see if having elderly folks take creatine monohydrate supplementation, if that would be beneficial in terms of not only helping to increase skeletal muscle mass, but also looking at maintaining a healthy energy output as well as maintaining healthy body fat. And this was one area where it kind of led into some other interesting findings, because what they discovered was not only was it beneficial when it came to maintaining the muscle mass, they also recognized that the creatine monohydrate seemed to be doing something when it came to brain health. So for the nervous system, and then they started to look at it in the setting of things such as Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. And the research from there really started to take off. So I think that this is one area that I wanted to kind of highlight for you, so you understand that when we talk about getting older, it's not just about, withering away and losing muscle mass. We also want to think about our cognition. And we know now that creatine plays a really key role in this, which is why study after study now has been focused on that. So we're kind of moving away from that whole athletic performance study based and now looking at it in the setting of neuromuscular and nervous system health and cognitive health. And that's why in the Journal of Neurology, they were looking at creatine monohydrate, how that could actually help people who had neuromuscular diseases. So when you think about things such as muscular dystrophy, for example, and seeing the benefits of creatine monohydrate supplementation, this is where much of the more advanced research has really started to take off. Now, for me, because I have a huge interest when it comes to anything that's kind of neurological related or brain health related, this is where I found much of the research on creatine to be really very profound. And what they were recognizing was that as we get older, we can end up with this, it's called lipofusion, and it builds up within the brain. So when we're having mitochondrial dysfunction, remember that's your little energy center in the brain, and we are losing energy production, then we start to get this buildup of gunk. And so we consider that to be called lipofusion. And what they were seeing was that the addition of creatine seemed to be able to target that lipofusion buildup. So we think of the lipofusion like this cellular garbage that is building up that can affect so many aspects of overall cellular health. And that's why they have now been able to determine that creatine could actually help to boost cellular energy as well as lower that accumulation of that lipofusion in the brain, which is really quite remarkable. So we talk about mitochondria and the function of the mitochondria. I'm big into cellular health. I'm big into neurological diseases and looking at all of these different factors. So to think that there's this amino acid that we always just think of it as, hey, it's for working out, and now saying, wait, this actually does so much to actually protect our brain as we get older. This is absolutely remarkable. So you think about all the different brain disorders that can occur. I had mentioned Parkinson's, talked about Alzheimer's disease, mild cognitive impairment. We can even look at issues that happen with traumatic brain injuries. We can look at strokes and spinal cord injuries, and seeing now that creatine plays this really important function in terms of energy enhancing, at the same time allowing for that garbage buildup within the cells to be removed. So one area of research that I find incredibly important is looking at how creatine, this amino acid, actually can help to enhance the survival of the neurons that are responsible for producing dopamine, which is really important when we think about Parkinson's, because we know that in Parkinson's disease, we're having this basically a breakdown of the dopaminergic neurons. So we're losing that dopamine, and they've been able to show that creatine supplementation in patients who have Parkinson's actually help to improve mood, as well as really allow for better energy facilitation within the cells. So I think that that's one area that you just don't ever hear about it. And so for me, when I look at different formulations, and you can look in our Power Plant line of products, and we have our creatine monohydrate, and oftentimes people would ask me, look, what's the best thing that I should use before a workout or after a workout? And you always turn towards your amino acids. But I always wanted people to know, hey, creatine monohydrate's not just good for your muscles. Think about all these other things. Think about that lipofusion. And not that many people know what lipofusion is, but if you think, hey, you get this garbage that builds up in your cells, and when that garbage builds up and the body can't remove it, basically that cell is going to degrade or basically die. So in those situations, if people have that understanding, they'll say, oh, okay, so if I have a lot of this garbage building up in my cells, then we can kind of look at that as a marker for aging. Well, yes, we certainly can. And now knowing that this powerful amino acid can do so much for ATP production in the brain, for supporting muscle mass, for cleaning up that cellular debris, I think is really quite interesting. Now we can also look at the cardiovascular effects. So talked about the neurological effects, but understanding also, if we look at it in that setting of ATP production, then we know it's got to be beneficial even for the cardiac myocytes. That's the cells that are responsible for heart function. So if we can help to enhance, once again, the way that the body is producing adenosine triphosphate, then that's always a good thing. That's why people take ubiquinol, for example, coenzyme Q10, is to enhance ATP production. Well, we know that our amino acids can help to do that too. So we can look at creatine in that setting of being beneficial in heart function. Even they've looked at creatine supplementation in patients who have congestive heart failure. And they know that when patients who have significant cardiovascular disease supplemented with carnitine, that they did much better in terms of just basic function. So for a lot of people, especially those who have congestive heart failure, they get winded very easy. And so even small tasks, cleaning their house, walking from point A to point B can really wear them out. And they found that with supplementation of creatine monohydrate that they did much better. So we see all of these ways in which this simple amino acid is working. We also see how it can help to support the endocrine system. When we think about the blood glucose system, so we're talking about pancreatic function. This is one of the natural things that creatine actually does. Its ability to boost that muscle energy level is very important when we talk about metabolic rate, and when we look at its ability to even lower blood glucose levels. So this is something that is known about creatine, that creatine supplementation can target a particular production of something known as the glucose transporter complex. So it's called GLUT4. So we know this already about creatine, that this is one of its many functions. So far beyond what most people recognize creatine to be, which is just for maintaining muscle mass. Now we know that the majority of creatine in the body is stored within the skeletal muscle, but understanding that we have this significant amount that pools within the brain. That's why we focus on the neurological aspects and facilitation. We also recognize that because of the ability to generate ATP, this is why it's beneficial for cardiac function. We understand that because it can help with that triggering of that GLUT4 pathway, that this can be beneficial when it comes to maintaining healthy blood glucose levels. So it's really quite a unique amino acid, and for all of the different ways someone may be able to benefit from using creatine monohydrate on a regular basis. Now, for each person, it's going to be different as to how often you use it, how much you use it. This is when you'd want to definitely talk to one of the Invite Health experts to make sure that you're on the right routine. Now, here's just another couple of little side notes on creatine. Creatine actually functions in terms of having antioxidant properties as well. So I'm huge on anything that can fend off free radicals and protect the cells from oxidative damage. So I think that that's just another benefit. We think of an amino acid and we think, okay, it's just an amino acid. No, this also has antioxidant properties to it. And we also see that because of that, that creatine can help to support a healthy innate immune response. So we have our innate response and we have the adaptive response. So the innate, that's your initial or immediate immune system response. We know that creatine, having adequate creatine in our system is very, very beneficial when it comes to allowing the body to recognize foreign invaders and to be able to fend them off. So having enough creatine, not only beneficial to maintain that muscle mass, support the heart, support the brain, but also to fend off oxidative stress and to support a healthy immune response. So many different functions for creatine monohydrate. Make sure that you go to our website and check it out. That's invitehealth.com. And I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the Invite Health podcast. Remember, you can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Now, do make sure that you subscribe and you leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. And we will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health podcast.